good. So yeah, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Rowan.
Hi, everyone. Let me know if my voice is not loud enough. I tend to start to mumble after I've been talking for a while. My name is Roan, and I do watercolor. More recently, I've been doing a lot of gouache, but watercolor is definitely my favorite. I own an art shop with my husband, Sean Boyles, here in Japantown in San Jose. It's called the Arsenal. We teach art classes, workshops. We sell art supplies, and we have a gallery. And then also, I love native plants. For a little bit, I want to say maybe like 12, 15 years ago, I took some horticulture classes at Foothill College, and that's where I kind of found my love for native plants. So I incorporate a lot of it in my paintings, my murals. So for today, we will be painting native plants. I put a link on the chat, but Elaine, we might have to repost it as people join, because I think they don't have the chat. So there's a Google link for references. A lot of those are plants in my yard, and I think just the Medalia poppies, those are from Mission College. My husband Sean teaches at Mission College, and they have a bunch of native plants there. It's super fun. But okay, cool. So I guess to start with, let's talk a little bit about materials. So let me move this paper. So watercolor paper, there are two kinds. You'll probably see that there's a hot press watercolor paper or a cold press watercolor. What am I doing? There you go. Cold press watercolor paper. I like this brand, Fluid watercolor paper. The Canson XL ones too, which is the pad gives you more paper, and it's cheaper, but the paper is still really good. So cold press paper is usually what I use for my watercolors. Cold press means that the surface has more texture. It's a little bit rough. And then a hot press watercolor paper. So usually it's 140 pound. They go up to I think 300 pound, maybe heavier than that. But 140 pound isn't, that's good enough. It lets you do blooms. The effect of watercolor is really good on the watercolor paper. But the hot press is smooth. It's a smooth surface. So if you like to watercolor and then do micron pens or fine liner pens on top, this would be the paper to use, because the fine tips of those pens, it's better to use them on smooth paper. So that's for paper. And let me know if you guys have any questions. For brushes, there are synthetic brushes and Kolinsky brushes, which is made of squirrel hair. Kolinsky brushes tend to be more expensive, a lot more expensive. The hairs hold more water, more pigment. It's fun to use, but really, I probably have one out of 4 of my brushes. There's one Kolinsky, and then the rest of them are just the synthetic brushes, which also do a good job. So there are those ones. The size, I usually do maybe 2. Oh, no, I never do 2. It's 4, 6, 8. Those are my sizes. So 4, 6. What am I doing? Sorry. Right there. Sorry, Elaine. There you go. That size is good for 9 by 12 sheets, 5 by 7, 4 by 6 sheets. So usually my size of paper that I use, the 4, 6, and 8 size brushes, is perfect. And I just need usually a round brush for my watercolor needs, but flat brushes are used for doing bigger washes. I tend to use just for wash, for details, for everything, just a round brush. And then every now and then, like when I'm at the beach or something, I'll use a water brush. So this is fun when I don't want to like, or when I don't have a surface to put my water on, or to put my jar of water on. Okay, and then the paints. So usually I just have a palette and I squeeze the paints the colors that I like to use, and then I just let it dry there, and I use it forever, you know, until I use up all of the pigment. My favorite brands are M. Graham. M. Graham is honey based, so it tends to re-wet creamier. So I really like that about M. Graham. Another honey based paint that might be popular is Holbein and Sennelier. Those ones are honey based. And M. Graham I think is made in Portland, so that's pretty cool. It's pretty close to us. And then Daniel Smith is really good for like just a variety of colors. They have like a huge range of like neutral colors and bright colors. It's just really good quality watercolor paint. All right. Any questions before I start on warm-ups? Are we good, Elaine? Cool. All right, so let's start with warm-ups. Or actually, let me run through all the stuff that we're gonna do today before we start. So first, we're gonna do like some warm-ups, and then I'll show you guys some techniques, and then we'll do a little bit of color mixing, just the ones we need for doing like plants, more natural colors. And then we'll do a couple like practice on leaves, flowers, and then do like a plant. Right, so is everyone ready for their warm-ups? Get my warm-up sheet. And then, so this is what we're doing. Put it right here. All right, so watercolor is a lot about the ratio of water to pigment. And once you kind of like have that down, then you can manipulate it the way you want. Like you can manipulate it to, because people usually say, oh, watercolor is really hard, you know, but once you have the water pigment ratio, you're good. I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use like an earth tone. Use brown. So for the first part, we'll just warm up. We'll get a good feel for the water to pigment ratio and our brush. So hopefully you guys have a round brush. This one I'm going to be using as a size 6. And let's just do some short lines, some tick marks. So if you try using, so that one is kind of like equal parts water and pigment. And then I'll try using more pigment, less water. So more pigment, less water gives you the darkest or the most saturated colors, right? It's also, it can give you good detail. So if you barely touch the paper with your brush, just touch it with the tip of your brush, you can get some pretty fine lines. And then if you put more pressure on your brush, then you can get some thicker lines. Then if we do more water, less pigment, you'll have some lighter lines.
Rowan, there was a question about bringing the palette closer to the warm-up paper,
Oh,
maybe to see how much pigment you're putting on.
yeah, do this. Does that work?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think so. Let us know, Georgia. You need to change.
All right. So next we're going to, like, at the same time we're doing the water to pigment ratio, we're also going to practice brush control. So let me just put this here. We don't need that stuff anymore. Focus on this one. So let's do maybe about equal water and pigment, and just light pressure on the paper and do really thin straight line. If you hold your brush closer to the brush hairs, then that could give you more control. So this part of the brush, I think it's a ferrule, F-E-R-U-L-E. So if you put your fingers there, you can get better control. And then I'm going to do a little bit more water and pigment on the brush so it can go a longer way. And if you put your fingers back and press down harder, you can get some thicker lines, so thick straight lines. All right, so for the next one, we're going to do thin line again, but we'll do a curve. So try to get an even pressure. Now we're going to do that curvy line with more pressure. So it's a thicker line. And then for our last one, we'll do a combination of thick and thin lines. So change it up a bit. Cool. How'd everyone do so far? Pretty good. Okay, so I'll put this here. And then for our next sheet of paper, or on one side of your paper, another side, we're gonna do some basic techniques. So for this one, maybe I'll use red. So for our first technique, we call it wet on wet. What you're gonna do is wet your paper, like have like a little pool of just plain water there. And then also wet the pigment in your palette. If you test it out just by doing a dot, then it gives you, that's what they call a bloom. And sometimes you can do it on the same spot. I'll just give you that nice effect. And then this other wet on wet technique is kind of the opposite way. So I'll do color, a pool of color on my paper. And then just drop clean water. You can do this effect with rock salt also, because it'll push the pigment away. Or I think rubbing alcohol usually works with this too, but water also works. And then another wet on wet would be 2 different colors. I'm gonna pick a light color. So just make sure your pigment is wet enough, right? You can move that around a little. All right. So for this next two, we'll use more pigment, less water, so that we can get a really dark saturated color. So we'll do 2 blocks. And then we'll let that dry. And while we're waiting for these 2 blocks to dry, rinse out your brush. We're going to do the dry brush technique. So I rinsed out my brush, and then I'm making sure that it's nice and dry. Sometimes you can even like separate the hairs a little bit. And then pick a side of your watercolor that doesn't have that much water. This works best on cold press paper. And since you have that texture on your paper, you're just gonna get a feel for that texture and lightly run your brush through the surface of the paper. So this one's a good texture for, I've used it on like a meadow, like when I wanted like to show atmospheric perspective and, you know, the really far areas. I just did this texture on it, and then as I went closer, I put more detail. With blue, it also kind of looks like the ocean. I'm okay with music, Elaine. It's probably gonna be more relaxing. All right, so it looks like our two dark blocks of color is pretty much dry. So what's fun about watercolor is you're able to re-wet after you've put it down on the paper. So for this block, what I'm gonna do is re-wet it and extend it down, and then just use more water so that I can do like a gradient. And then this other block, you want your brush to just be damp. So dip it in water and then wipe it off a little bit. And if you go from the clean side of the paper into the red block, you have to do it a few times. But that lets you, oh no, what happened?
Did it go to sleep? There you go.
Okay. And it lets you pick up that pigment. usually when you use like the earth tones, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, it lets you pick up the pigment all the way to like the white of the paper, which is pretty cool. But like more stainy pigments, like, you know, a cadmium red or a phthalo blue, you'll just get like a light stain of the pigment. And this is good for, I've used these for doing highlights. Cool. All right. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Everyone good? Okay. So this part of color mixing that I want to talk to you guys about would just be for maybe more relevant for doing more nature stuff like botanical drawings. When I do like shadows, like really dark shadows or blacks, I tend to not use a black, like an ivory black watercolor. What I'll do is get like maybe like a burnt umber or a sepia. This one's a sepia. And mix it with a blue, like a phthalo blue, ultramarine blue. And that gives me like a black or a gray, but it's not like a flat color, like it's more vibrant. What this does too, let me show you what it looks like. So what it lets you do is if you're, especially if you're using it for shadow, is it lets you get like a cool shadow. If you want to do a cooler shadow or a warmer shadow. And temperature really helps with pushing and pulling of like elements on your painting. So if things you want things to come forward or you want to push things back. That was my husband.
Bless you.
And you'll see that if you just, you know, use more pigment or use more water, less pigment, you'll get like a really light gray. Or you could do like a darker. So, and then another color mixing technique that I like to do is, so we use a lot of greens when we do botanicals, like leaves, and green out of the tube. This one's a really good green. It's Hooker's green. It's one of my favorite greens. Tend to be pretty saturated. Let's see. I think Viridian is even more like, it has like a plasticky feel. What kind of greens do you guys have? Is it okay for me to answer, to ask people? Phthalo green, Viridian tend to look, you know, like this, more plasticky. So when I want to neutralize these greens, usually the go-to for like darkening or neutralizing it would be like to put a brown with it, right? But instead I do a little bit of red, which is a complementary color of green. And it keeps my painting from being too muddy. So I have like a nice pine green there. A little bit of red with this green. So that red gives you like maybe like a darker or more neutral version of that color. Same goes for like if the flower is, for example, the flower is red, then I'll do green with it. Or if the flower is purple, you can do a little bit of like orange or yellow. Purple is complementary as yellow. And that should neutralize it. Do we have time? Let's see. I'll do the purple. This one is a dioxazine purple. It's a common purple, usually have in your watercolor sets. I'll do, I think this one's a cadmium yellow. So that little bit of yellow neutralizes that purple. Cool. All right. Now let's do some brush control, leaf, and flower warm-ups. If you click on the Google link,
And I'll link it again.
So there are several plants in here. So you notice is California lilac. Oh, how do I show this to you guys? It's okay. you could just look through it. But let's do one of the leaves. So this one is going to be the California lilac leaf, and it's like an oval leaf. And so since with watercolor, we usually work light to dark. So I'm going to start with light. So to do a light, you want to do more water, less pigment. And I'm just going to do the shape of the leaf. So usually when I do the shape of the leaf, I start from the pointy part and then press down to get the more bulbous part. All right. Then I'll do more saturated. It's also good to have a tester paper so that you can test out your color before you use it on your actual painting. Lets you test out the lightness and darkness, how much more water you need. So since with watercolor, we're just, we don't use white. we have to be more mindful about leaving the lighter areas. That's one leaf. Can also do the monkey flower leaf, which is just and then the manzanita leaf is, it's probably my favorite leaf. It's just an oval. It's pretty fun. So just by doing single strokes, you can get like the shape and form of the leaf. If you want to practice that. And with watercolor, I recommend like the less strokes on something. Like usually, like there's like a danger of like overworking an area. And since it's such a transparent medium, it really shows when something is overworked. So sometimes what I'll do is like if I have either like a reference that's in front of me, like if I have like a life reference or a photo reference, I'll look at it for probably like 30 seconds and just play in my head how I would paint it, you know? So I'll kind of like look at the leaf and like, okay, you know, like this is like a couple of brush strokes. I would do, if I want to show the veins of the leaf, then I'll have to leave that part. This one is a Cleveland sage leaf. I like this one too, because usually I could just do it in one stroke. Thank you, Elaine. And then for flowers, let's do the sticky monkey flower. That's the orange, yellow-orange one. I have to plug in my phone, it looks like. I have the plug right here.
What was this called again?
Sticky monkey flower.
Sticky monkey flower.
So the petals of the sticky monkey flower is, I could do it 2 ways, maybe do. So that's one of the petals. Another one. So this is like a good, like first layer, and then you can make some areas more saturated or some areas darker with your second pass. Sometimes for darker, you want to wait. Well, a lot of times you want to wait for it to dry. I'll probably pull that middle because there's a light area there. And then we could do this other one. It's called a California fuchsia. It has the bright red flowers. That flower is more like a cadmium red. I don't think I have that red right now. So I would do that one. Let me test that out. So this one has a lot of white highlights, and I want to be mindful of those parts and leave them. It may look abstract at first. But as you keep putting the darker parts or more details, it starts to take shape. Cool. Do we have any questions before I move on to the next one? How's everyone with pace? Should we slow down or everyone's good? Cool. All right. So just to review before we do our full plant is these are our warm-ups, some of the techniques, color mixing, and practicing leaves and flowers. All right, so for our for this first plant, I want us to, well, I'm going to do the Cleveland sage, and it's this one that's like a powdery green, and it has a dark purple tip, like one of the leaves have a dark purple tip. Is that a good description?
I think so.
Okay.
Um,
So it's a Cleveland sage. And they named it Cleveland sage because I think the last name of the guy that discovered it is Cleveland. Savia Clevelandi. It is California native. Okay, cool. All right. So I really like this one because we can usually do the leaves in one stroke and then do some of the shadows on top of it. So it'll only do like 2 or 3 layers. I also like that there's a bright purple and pink on the tips. So first, I'm going to do a wash of the whole thing. Actually, I'm not going to do that.
Rowan, could you make sure if that's the right one? Just because some people weren't able to see the Google photo. I don't know if that's the correct one.
Yes, that is the right one.
That is. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to start with that big leaf that has a purple tip. And I'm going to try to mix like a bluish, so very neutral green. But since it's bluish, I'm going to add a tiny bit of blue. And red. Oh no, you guys can't see me. Okay, let me test that. That's a good dark version. Okay. So this big leaf, just gonna do a wash, which means there more water, less pigment. You can also use a pencil to do an outline. And if you do, I would recommend a light pencil, like a 2H or lighter than that, 2H, 4H. And let's do the purple. Do it like this. Yeah. It's a more neutral purple. All right. So that's my wash. Now I'll put in some saturated darker colors. And purple. Oh. When a reference is also too busy, like you get distracted by all the details, it's good to squint your eyes, and then that will show you, that'll kind of just show you the highlights and the shadows and then the shape. All right. I'll probably do another pass for the darkest parts, but I'll leave this like this for now. Then I'll do the other leaves. So just get the shape of the leaf and see how I could use my brush to get that shape. Maybe put in some stem. What did I do? With watercolor, I usually paint the subject matter first and then paint the background after. And that's because I want to make sure that I'm leaving the white parts, just the white of the paper. Hmm. And what's fun about doing plants is you don't have to, you can just pick which leaves you want to put in there. Just because it's such an organic subject matter, that if you decide like, oh, that's too busy, I want to just do these leaves, then it will still look like that plant. All right, let me see if I could do more. Finish this leaf up. And just as with any painting that you do in layers, the more layers, so it's up to you, right? As with watercolor, it's fun because if you just leave it loose, it the type of paint it is, it kind of, it has that nice effect. I don't know how to describe it. Just because the blooms and the brush strokes, leaving it loose, it is also could be like a finished painting. But also, if you want it, the more realistic you want your painting to be, then you can add more layers. So I think that's all the detail I'm going to do on this one. And then put darker values on other leaves that I did. Just to talk a little bit about native plants, um, I think it's the best type of plants to have, like now with the way, with the drought, because what it is you plant, it's best to plant them in the fall, and then as the rains in the winter and spring, that'll kind of give them a lot of water and get them established. And then in the summer, you pretty much don't have to water them. They don't like hot weather water, so they're best to just be left alone. And it's great because I really don't like watering plants in the summer. But yeah, so with native plants, you just leave them and they still look great. You'll notice as you're adding on the layers, when it dries, the water tends to absorb the pigment and it makes it lighter. So you have to go back and darken certain areas. You can be more playful and maybe add like a bright yellow or brighter colors on there, depending on your preference. And with that time, I think we'll only do this plant.
Or if you want to like start another one, it's up to whoever.
Yeah, I might do a little bit of the background here. How's everyone doing with this painting the Cleveland sage? I'll do some darks, like a brownie dark.
Oof.
Right, and then sometimes you'll see some watercolors that don't really have backgrounds. If you want to put a background, you could just do like a wash. I'll do like a brown I'm gonna push it back, so maybe like a cool brown by adding some blue. And then I'll just put that on there. This means I should make my stem higher contrast so it's not competing with the background. I'll do like a, I'll do like a light blue background on this side. Does anyone have any questions? About materials? I'll probably start another one. 15 minutes. Let's do the Madalia poppy. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that correctly.
There's a question. Would you only paint the veins of the leaves if you were doing the painting more detailed?
Yeah, so if I had planned to do the painting more detailed, it would be similar to what I did here, where I'll do like a really light, wash just to have a shape to follow. Oh, a really light wash just to have a shape to follow. And then once that's dry, then I would put in the darker more saturated pigment, following the parts that are not the veins, because it looks like for leaves the veins are the lighter parts, so that involves more planning. Kind of like what I did here, but I use so much water. All right, let's do a white flower so that we can work on some subtleties and neutrals. So with the white flower, I'll probably just use mostly the brown and blue color mixing. And that really light Chester paper. Definitely want a Tesser paper for doing something so delicate and subtle as this. So I'll do the shape of the petals first. And since these petals, there's actually a direction to kind of like a grain from the middle of the flower going outwards, then I'll paint it that way also. So it's super light to begin with. You can even be like maybe more free and just have fun with this one. Hopefully you're having fun the whole time. All right. I think one of the petals is yellow. Then do the center. There's a lot of detail in the center of that flower, but I'm just going to squint my eyes and focus on the simpler parts of it, just to give an impression of the flower. All right, now a little bit darker. Looks like the shadows are cooler shadows. A little bit more saturated here. And then this is where a background color will be helpful to bring out these whites. Maybe a cooler green with some neutrals. So I can show the shape of these petals by putting in the background. Maybe if there are highlights on the edges, that might be fun to leave too. Okay, and I would still put some darker parts, like in the center of the flower, it's really dark. More saturated here. And then you could just, for the corners, or like this, like these areas, you can make them darker. And there you go.
You make it so easy and simple.
Hopefully you guys, it's easy and simple for you too. Once you kind of see like techniques and how it's done, it gets easier. I'll put this guy here.
Everyone doing? I don't know if anybody wants to share what they drew.
Yeah.
You can get a screenshot. We don't have to. That's always nice. Roanne, do you have any favorite like reference books or other resources or tutorials you like to point people to?
I mean, that looks great. um, I I like my references are usually like in person, like I'm right there, or a photo that I took. Because of that, I'm able to just like have more control as to like which leaf I want to, I want to have closer, or, I like how the shadows are on this side. Like it's, I have better control of like maybe composition too, like the lights and darks. So I like using references of photos that I took, but otherwise I don't know. Oh, this is a library. I should probably recommend a book.
Do you have any, or are there any art books that you particularly like to recommend?
Right now, I just got. Again, my mind is blank. Oh, there's a native plant book that I just like had forever and have references, and I think it's just like California native plants. It has like blue-eyed grass, like this type of native in the front, and I've like had that for years, probably for like 15 years, just referencing that one. Yeah. What is the book? I can't remember. I have it in my mind, and it's this artist. I got his book, and I'm doing a lot of like, he does a lot of gouache and watercolor. So
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I can see if I can find something to link to. And then another question also, like you mentioned like squinting, like to try to like pick out things if you're worried about the detail.
Yeah.
Or do you have any other suggestions for dealing with like the negative space? Like, for instance, like drawing this white flower, you started with um like a
Like
really washed out gray, and then, figuring out, what do you leave lighter, or how do you make that apparent?
right. With plants, it's super organic. So when you kind of just like when you squint your eyes, just look at like where it's like really light, the light source, and just kind of go that way. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you want to do something really detailed, I would recommend maybe drawing it in pencil first, so you have like really accurate forms. With watercolor, it's fun to just go at it with a brush and just be more free. I've noticed, and I would tell my students, my watercolor students, that I could tell which pieces are like how they feel. Like it kind of like reflects like how they feel. Usually, if they're like frustrated, the piece looks like, because it's such a transparent medium, the piece looks like you can see where they were frustrated, it just shows there. And then the parts where they had fun and was just like free, you could tell too, because like the strokes are more confident.
Does anybody else have any questions, or would people be up for showing things? People just drawing, that's cool too.
And you guys can have that link for a while. Sometimes I'll like the more like reference photos I get, I'll just like put it on there if I feel like they're good references.